Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call the February 7th meeting of the City of Issaquah's Development Commission to order at 6:30 p.m. As a reminder, we do still have a remote aspect to our meetings. This means both staff and members of the public may be participating in the meeting remotely via WebEx. For those attending remotely, if you have questions or issues, please send the host a chat message or email staff at christiang@issaquahwa.gov. That's christiang@issaquahwa.gov. There are two excused absences for the meeting tonight, Commissioner Gilbert and Commissioner Ikeda. Alternate member Jeff Mayo is filling in this evening as a regular member. Welcome, Jeff. Our first item of business tonight is to take action on the meeting minutes for December the 6th. Hope everyone has had an opportunity to review them. Are there any corrections to the December 6th minutes provided in the agenda packet? Hearing none, the minutes are approved as submitted. Next, I'd like to open the floor for any members of the public in person or virtually who would like to make a general comment, not about the Mathur Townhomes project, but on general topics. There will be an opportunity later in the meeting for those who'd like to comment about the project on tonight's agenda. Mr. Getz, has anyone signed up in advance to make general public comments?
We have nobody in the room that has signed up, and there are 3 individuals online, I believe are all the applicants.
Okay, so no general comments from persons online?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move ahead then to our regular business tonight and our main agenda item, pre-decision open record public hearing. The order of operation for this hearing will be as follows. First, the purpose of the public hearing, followed by appearance of fairness disclosures. Then we'll open the public hearing with a staff presentation and an applicant presentation. Then the floor will be open for public comment. There'll be an opportunity for rebuttal by applicant and staff, and then we'll close the public hearing. Commission deliberation will then be followed by commission action, including motions, amendments, and vote, and that will conclude the agenda item on the quasi-judicial permit. If for any reason the hearing on this action can't be completed this evening, the hearing may be continued at a specified date. Purpose of the public hearing. This is the formal public hearing for the Mathur Townhomes development. The proposal being considered is a site development permit application for a 4,661 square foot 4-unit apartment building located at 35 2nd Avenue Southeast. The purpose of this hearing is to solicit relevant public comment and facilitate review, discussion, and decision on the application by the Development Commission. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, and so Mr. Getz, please proceed with our appearance of fairness disclosures.
Okay. So quasi-judicial decisions require proceedings to be fair in fact and appearance. Similar to a courtroom setting, ex parte contacts are prohibited. Communications outside of the hearing between a decision maker and an opponent or proponent of the matter at hand are prohibited. If such communications have occurred, record of the substance of the communication must be placed on the record to allow other interested parties the right to rebut the substance of such communication. The test, which we'll get into in a moment, would a disinterested person have being appraised of the totality of the decision maker's personal interest in a matter being acted upon be reasonably justified in thinking that that partiality may exist. Decision makers who have personal interest, prejudgment of issues, or partiality are disqualified from proceeding. So the questions we'll run through here. With regard to the outcome of this proceeding, for the commissioners, do you have a personal interest, financial or otherwise, in the outcome?
No.
Does your employer have an interest, financial or otherwise, in the outcome?
No.
Do you have any familial, social, or business relationships or connections with any of the parties or non-parties who have an interest in the outcome?
No.
Do you have any special knowledge about the substantive or the merits of this proceeding which would or could cause you to prejudge the outcome?
No.
Okay. And additionally, will there be any prospective employment for you or your family because of the decision?
No.
Do you own or control property within 300 feet of the subject property?
No.
And have you had any ex parte communications regarding this project?
No.
Final piece here. Do you believe you can sit and hear this matter fairly and impartially, both as to the respective positions of the proponents and opponents of this matter?
Yes.
All right. And questions for the audience, in person or virtually? If you are virtual, please raise your hand. Does anyone in attendance wish to challenge the participation of any commissioner based on appearance of fairness doctrine? If you have an objection, raise your hand. And okay. That is it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll open the public hearing at 6:36 p.m. So first we'll proceed with staff presentation. Mr. Yormick, I will need to swear you in. Please state your name and position with the city for the record. You swear by oath or affirmation the testimony you're about to provide is true?
I do.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Good evening. Name is Douglas Yormick, Associate Environmental Planner with the City of Issaquah, here to present the Mathur Townhomes project, file number SDP 23-000. The site is located directly behind me at the intersection of East Sunset and 2nd Avenue Southeast. The zoning is multifamily high density and is in the Old Town neighborhood. The proposal is a 3-story, 4-unit townhome, approximately 4,600 square feet in size. Each unit will be approximately 1,000 square feet. The site is 0.14 acres and is currently vacant. Single-family residence was demolished a couple of years ago on the site. In addition to the proposed building, there will be some upgrades to the existing frontage improvements that are provided as part of the proposal. As noted in the staff report, there is a deviation to the street standards request that was reviewed by Community Planning and Development and Public Works Engineering. Since there are no planned CIP projects in the vicinity, Public Works has requested just an upgrade to the existing frontage instead of doing the full frontage improvements that are included in the City of Issaquah street standards. So in the street standards for both 2nd Avenue Southeast and East Sunset Way, half-street improvements are required. That would include 5-foot sidewalks, 5-foot landscape strip, 11-foot travel lanes, and a bike lane. However, as I discussed before, Public Works has requested that the frontage improvements be upgraded, but to match the existing, since there are no planned improvements along either of those stretches, mainly the addition of a bike lane, because there are no projects planned to include bike lanes along either of those streets. So currently there is a curb, gutter, 5-foot sidewalk, 4-foot landscape strip behind the sidewalk on East Sunset, and then on 2nd Avenue, it's just to match, which is curb, gutter, 3.5-foot landscape strip, and a 5-foot sidewalk. The site will be accessed from an alley off of 2nd Avenue, and that alley will have to be paved 20 feet. So as mentioned, access to the site is through the alley. Code requires 4 parking stalls, 4 are proposed. In addition to those 4, we have electric vehicle standards, and they are providing 1 EV stall, and then the rest of the stalls will be ready. The parking area will be screened from 2nd Avenue with a screen fence and the landscape that is required for the development. So currently there are no trees on site for tree retention. A type 3 visual buffer is required around the perimeter of the site. Since the site lacks any significant trees and has zero canopy coverage, this requirement to meet the 20-year canopy coverage in our updated land use code will be reviewed during the landscape permit and building permit review. In Exhibit F are the material samples. There are two main colors of the building, white and brick veneer. The materials chosen, the brick veneer and the board and batten, will provide texture. Exhibit E provides the proposed elevations. The building meets the district standards for height by limiting to 3 stories. The building height itself is under 40 feet at 37 feet, 3¼ inches. Also in that same exhibit, the elevations and rendering show a modulated facade and a varied roof line to break up the mass of the building. The facade has windows of various sizes surrounded by trim. The public-facing facades have at least 15% glazing complying with the standards, and each of the 4 units will provide direct pedestrian access to 2nd Avenue. With that, are there any questions? To me.
Yeah, so this is for clarifying questions for staff only. So then the applicant will present. You can have clarifying questions.
I did have a question about the staff report, specifically the Old Town standards. And specifically about the windows and the trim. It states that it should have a substantial visible trim and in a contrasting color. As I look at the drawings, I don't see any trim on the windows or doors. I wouldn't expect there to be any on the brick areas, but there's none apparent. Is that just the nature of the model I'm seeing? Or do you know? Or potentially that's a question for the applicant.
I'd say that would be a question for the applicant. To my knowledge, the windows are surrounded by trim, and they have a trim color selected, which is, it's in the material sample exhibit, I believe Exhibit F. Okay. They show what the trim color is.
Okay, thank you. I'll defer my question to the applicant.
Other questions for staff? Commissioner Morgan.
I noticed that there's a lot of, I'm not sure the volume, but a lot of non-native plants included in the list. Do we have any requirements in terms of percentage of native, non-native?
We don't have any percentage for native, non-native when it's not contained within or adjacent to a critical area, such as a stream or a wetland. We would review the landscape when the final landscape plans come in for landscape permit review. We would just review that against the landscape code in Title 18.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sure.
The 28% canopy coverage at 20-year, how is that checked up on or enforced?
This is a new code that I don't know if we technically will have an enforcement mechanism with it, but what we would do is during permit review, the species of trees that are selected, they would have to provide a 20-year canopy coverage estimate, and we have some sheets that, some worksheets that show what that 20-year canopy coverage would be, so we would compare it to that, and then that would get, if you meet that requirement, it would get you through permitting. We don't have any follow-up with that, so we're not going to be doing a site-by-site measurement again in 20 years, but as part, and Christian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, we're going to be looking at the canopy coverage as part of the comprehensive plan to see if the neighborhoods are meeting their objective, their targets. And that's how we're going to, so this should, over time, increase the amount of coverage within each of these.
Thank you.
Other questions for staff? And also later on during deliberation, we'll have opportunity to ask staff and applicant questions again and make comments. Okay, now we'll proceed with the applicant's presentation.
Okay, Jennifer, I'm going to make you a panelist, and you should be able to share your screen and unmute yourself.
And Jennifer, I will need to swear you in.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Jennifer, could you please state your name for the record?
Jennifer Kim.
Okay, and do you swear by oath or affirmation the testimony you are about to provide is true?
Yes.
Thank you, and please proceed.
Let me share my screen here. You all see that?
Yes.
Most of what I'm going to present has been covered by Doug, so thank you, Doug, for presenting our project. I'm just going to show you kind of a few more visuals to go through kind of the architectural aspect of this project. Sorry, I'm Jennifer Kim from Medici Architects, by the way. So just to give you some site context or some additional context, the project site is on the southwest corner of East Sunset Way and 2nd Avenue Northeast in the Old Town sub-area. Adjacent uses include Issaquah City Hall, police, and fire station across Sunset Way to the west and north. And there's some duplex and fourplex residences to the west and south, and single family with commercial use across 2nd Avenue to the east. And there is an alley that runs along the south of the property. So this satellite view here still shows existing buildings, but as Doug had mentioned, those have been demolished, and you can see from these street views that the site is vacant, no trees. This site plan shows the orientation of the building fronting both Sunset Way and 2nd Avenue. The 4 units are all accessed from 2nd Avenue to the east. Covered parking for 4 vehicles is provided at the rear of the building off of the alley, and landscaping is proposed between the building and the street frontage. Frontage improvements will occur on both Sunset Way and 2nd Avenue in the way of replaced curb gutter, sidewalk, and planting strips. Each unit entry is accessed with a pedestrian walkway from the sidewalk with weather protection at the entry doors. Since the time this packet was submitted in November, we have revised our overhead protection at the doors to meet the code minimum of 4 foot deep by 4 foot wide. So this top image is the proposed front elevation as it faces 2nd Avenue that was submitted in the November packet. And as I mentioned that we've adjusted our weather protection at the entries, the 2 images on the bottom show the deeper overhangs that meet the 4 foot code minimum in each direction. Each unit is accessed from the ground level with individual walkways and lighting. We believe we meet the intent of the design standards with our use of modulation, materials, roof forms, windows, engagement of the street front, and providing separation between public and private spaces. Here, the left image shows the elevation that faces Sunset Way. Since the north elevation, as seen from Sunset Way, is highly visible from the street, we provide visual interest with the roof forms, modulation, materials, and location of doors and windows. The right image shows the view from the alley. This is the rear elevation facing west. It uses the same design elements and materials as the other elevations. So just an added comment, because that trim comment question did come up, we do intend to put trim around all of the windows. We did have a question about whether trim being of the same body color of the white would be appropriate or acceptable, as that kind of meets that same farmhouse style that we're going for. That may be a question that we follow up with the planners with, but we do intend to have trim around our windows and doors. And these are just some perspective views from different corners of the building. Since buildings are rarely seen straight on, we like to provide some images to better capture the building as a whole and how one would perceive it from ground level. We believe this project can play a vital part in not only providing housing in Issaquah, but energizing the Old Town area. Any questions?
Questions for applicant? Commissioner Price.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, thank you for your presentation. First of all, I want to say I think this is a great design. I've been curious what's going to happen on that lot, and I think you took a really unique lot, a very narrow lot, and and the outcome is terrific. So I want to start there. I think it's a
Thank you.
really strong gesture for that corner. I did have the trim question, so that's forthcoming. I understand that. I guess I'll just say out loud, I would be in support of a body trim color, given that the windows are highly contrasting. I think it would be too black, but that might not be in my purview. But then the second question I had was the height limit. In the staff report, it says it's 37 and change, but on the west elevation, I see one that's 41'9". Is that accurate, or am I misreading that?
So the city of Issaquah, and planners can correct me if I'm wrong, measures to the middle of the ridge of the roof for max height.
Okay, so it's an averaging across the site. Okay, that's fair. All right, that's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Maury?
Thank you. Jennifer, I was one that brought up the question about the 4-foot coverage, so thank you for getting that addressed so quickly. And the other question I was going to raise was the thought about having supports for the 2 inner units over that coverage, and it looks like you've added that, just like on the outer units.
Yeah, with the tiebacks to hold up the covering. Is that what you're talking about?
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a great idea. And the only other question I had, or suggestion, I guess, is back to where you show the angled views. On the upper left. So to me, it seems like the upper left is going to be the most visible view that a lot of people will be looking at that.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that jumped out at me is in the middle of that, I like the modulation, but the center portion there, we have about a 2-foot or 2-story tall white column, essentially surrounded by a couple of brick walls. And I wondered if there's a way to break that up a bit, even with just a band in the middle of it or something like that could work in architecturally, so it doesn't look too much like a blank column.
Sure. We can definitely take a look at that. I think we have gone back and forth with that area, knowing that is the most visible corner. I think plan-wise, we're not able to put any windows there, and so we kind of played with that white element, whether how tall that was, or did it come down to level. So we can definitely investigate that more to see how we can kind of make that less of a blank wall.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and I think the trees, if I remember right, is the smoke tree, but only gets after some time to 12 feet. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, good. Now we'll move into the public comment portion of the hearing then. Mr. Getz, has anyone signed up to comment on this topic?
Nobody has signed up to comment on this topic in the room, and there are only applicants and owners on the online.
Okay, thank you. So both in room and online, no one else wants to speak. Okay, does the applicant have any rebuttal to questions raised by the commission?
We have no rebuttal.
Okay. Staff, any rebuttal to the comments and questions you've heard so far? So, commissioners, are there any objections to closing the public hearing at this point? Commissioner Morgan.
No, I guess the only question is in terms of if they were going to add something that would be, I guess, something staff would look at in terms of if they added something architecturally to that corner. Is that, in other words, would we want to add any kind of condition to that, or just leave it to staff to consider it?
Right. It could be either adding it as a condition from discussion and deliberation by the commission. They've presented a design that is compliant, but as pointed out,
Okay.
a desire there.
All right. Well, maybe I'll just add a condition then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Fine. So, any objections to closing the public hearing? So I now close the public hearing at 6:56 PM. So Commission, it's time to move into deliberation portion of the meeting. Any discussion, this can include questions and comments to staff and applicant as well.
Agree with Commissioner Price. I think they've designed a great building for the parcel.
Great.
Yeah.
So I just have two questions, I guess. Christian, could we get access to the code popped up, please? I'd like to look at 18.700.110. I guess this is primarily for staff. Right, .110.
I've got the code up.
Okay, great. Any way you could share it with us? Okay, thanks. So if we go to 18.700.110 B1, this is about ground level details for multifamily. So this says buildings located in the multifamily zone on East Sunset Way only must incorporate at least one of these following. The address of this building technically is on Second, but we were just discussing the elevation, the importance of the elevation that faces Sunset. So my question, I guess, to staff is this applicable to this project, or because it has an address on Second, that it is not applicable?
I was taking this that since it's accessed from Second, that this wouldn't, but the applicant has provided elements for along Sunset for some engagements. There's the fence with trellis and gates and landscaping, and a path that goes through that gate to access the rear yard of the 4 units. But in terms of this, I was more looking at the access along Second and not Sunset.
So technically, this probably is not applicable, but nonetheless, it looks like the applicant has gone to the extra yard to provide some of this.
That's
some
correct.
of these amenities. Yeah. Thanks. And then on 18.602.060. This is on rooftop materials, and this is generally applicable, correct, to multifamily development?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, good. So I was looking at L1.
Sorry if I'm scrolling too quickly.
Right there, yeah. So the rooftops have to have sustainable materials. Examples are some of these. And it's not limited to these. And so we have metal roof, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. And it's black. Is the color, is that correct? Basically black. So which of these do you believe that this would meet? Is it 100% recyclable?
I'm going to defer to the applicant, but I believe when we were discussing during the pre-submittal community meeting that the roof could be made from recycled material or salvage material.
Yeah,
but I'll
and
let-
I guess this also says that if the material used is 100% recyclable, that would also fulfill this. But I guess the black roof color being the maximum absorptive and the least reflective makes me wonder if it's meeting the intent of this code. But it only has to meet one. So perhaps the applicant would like to speak to this.
Metal roofs are generally accepted as a recyclable material because after its lifespan, it can be reclaimed and reused in other forms of metal. So I would say that that would meet that criteria. Whether it's 100% recyclable roofing, I think it's hard to find anything that would be 100% recyclable.
Okay, did you consider a color for the roof that would be more reflective than all black?
We've come across this issue with actually some other projects we have in Issaquah. The problem with the dark roofs is that, or the solar reflectivity on the roofs, when you're trying to get it to be non-reflective, it's typically they've been tested when they're like white or very, very light colors, which we don't think necessarily would match the style or the intent of this design. So architecturally, we would prefer it to be a darker one. We can find one that may not be so dark, so that reflectively index is actually better than completely dark.
That would be great. I don't think it requires a condition, but I just wanted to comment on that, and I think that would be super.
Okay, we'll definitely look into it.
Any other discussion, comment, question? Seems to conclude our deliberation. With deliberation concluded, it's time for the commission to take action on the item before us. Before we move on to this, Commissioner Morgan, with your discussion regarding the banding, did you want to propose a condition for that, or how did you want to leave that before we move on to action?
I think I will add a condition on at the end,
Okay, great.
recommendation.
Great. It would be timely to do so now. Or we can
Oh,
do it
should I do
after
it
discussion.
after we have the
Right,
motion,
let's do it
and then I'll add it
after
to
the
the
main
motion?
motion
Yeah.
discussion. Okay. So it's time to take action before us. There a motion on the item before the commission.
I move that the Development Commission approve the site development permit for Mathur Townhomes, SDP 23-00001, as described and evaluated in the staff report dated January 30th, 2024, with exhibits A through K, subject to the conditions therein and as amended tonight.
Do I hear a second?
Second?
Discussion on the motion and any amendments or conditions?
Mr. Chair, the motion, I don't know that it mentioned the number of conditions, right?
Oh, yes, there's 7.
Okay.
Or-
So,
But
yeah.
plus.
Just so Mr. Chair, I move we add condition 8, state that the architect will endeavor to make changes to the white column portion of the northeast portion of the building to break up that facade with approval by city staff.
Second the motion.
Thanks. Any discussion on this condition amendment? All in favor of the amendment condition, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Condition passes unanimously. Any other amendments, conditions, discussions? Hearing none, we have the main motion before us. Vote on the main motion. This vote is on the main motion. All in favor of the main motion, say aye.
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 All opposed? Main motion passes unanimously. So this concludes the Mathur Apartment Development Permit. Notice of decision will be issued by staff within 7 days. I'd like to ask staff to provide any updates on City Council activities. Actually, before we do this, sorry, We have a second part to this. We've approved the main motion, but is there a follow-up motion on stating city action?
I move that the Development Commission direct the Community Planning and Development Department to prepare finding of facts and conclusions for review and approval by the Development Commission Chairman, affirming that Development Commission's decisions to approve the Mathur Townhomes, SPD 23-00001, subject to the conditions listed in the staff report dated January 30th, 2024, with exhibits A through K and as amended tonight.
For your second.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 All in opposed to the motion, no. Motion passes unanimously. This concludes the Mathur Apartment Development Permit. Notice of decision will be issued by staff within 7 days. City Council update. Staff, can you please provide any updates on City Council activity?
Absolutely. So we've got a limited update since our last meeting this evening. With the start of the new year, the council has completed elections for council president and deputy president. Councilmember Walsh was reelected as the council president, and Councilmember DeMichelle has been elected as the deputy council president. On January 30th, at a special city council meeting, the mayor gave her State of the City presentation. And then just this Monday, council heard an initial discussion and held a public hearing on a multifamily tax exemption to expand the current boundaries for the MFTE program to potentially incorporate the Shelter Holdings High Street collection, which was part of the development agreement that was passed in November. That took place this past Monday. That project is moving forward and will return to council sometime in March. That is all.
Thanks. Any other items of business or announcement from the staff? Thanks. There being no further business before the commission, this meeting is adjourned at 7:08 p.m.